So, welcome once again, Bob. Welcome for this spontaneous dialogue on this journey dialogues.
Thank you, Hemant. I'm happy to be with you.
Yeah, I feel now I feel a little unprepared for this call because just before this call, I was listening to our last conversation, and
Uh,
I wish I had completed that because it was. I went back and it was such a nice and such a profound exchange, and I just could complete only 18 minutes of the 52 minutes. Um, but I think it was interesting even then what we were trying to do. I think you had very reflectively looked at Kenefin framework and how there are certain aspects of the framework that do not capture the realism, as you said,
yeah.
of system of profound privileges and leadership as an institution, leadership oriented towards success and uh, probably the ignorance of socio-political, economic, historical, philosophical context and forces that are as much
hmm
at play when you're making those decisions. So it was a profound, wonderful conversation, and I should thank you
Well,
again
thank
for
you.
that.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. I hope others saw it and found it interesting as well. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think this one's beginning with Gary Hamel and Ratanji's
Yeah.
work. Uh, the 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 article that came out and I shared with you, the title of which
hmm
is "Leadership's Blind Spot," which states that until you change the system, nothing changes.
hmm
And I think a lot of thinking and a lot of momentum is building up, at least on LinkedIn and in some of the podcasts around systemic change and change the environment, fix the institutions, fix the incentives. So if I were to just put this, put it in some oversimplified context, I think across the world, over the ages, you've looked at essentially two kinds of voices. One voice constantly talking about fix the individual,
hmm
and the other talking about fix the interpersonal spaces or the in between spaces or the institutional spaces. And
hmm
and I know these are not very strict categories.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, so I would stop here. I think you had certain intuitions and certain reflections on the article. If we can
Mhm.
start with that, Bob.
Sure. Um, so the difficulty with this is, first of all, it's usually people outside the institution of leadership and system of profound privilege that would like to see the changes. And the people inside the institution of leadership and system of profound privilege, which are people of high status and power and wealth and so forth. And they're not bad people. They're just in a different social system. Hamel refers to it as an intellectual caste system. I would say it's different than that. It's a social type of social caste system. But the people inside the institution of leadership and system of profound privilege don't see much need for the change that others are clamoring for. And I think they look at the kind of changes that others want as kind of an obsession with better when good enough will do. And the leaders will tell you that they work hard and they're looking out after people and so forth. And of course, this could change with AI and so on. And what's often lost, is the counter argument that there are benefits to how things have evolved over time in terms of the political system, the economic system, and the business world, and so on, and that has benefits and it's lifted people up out of poverty and so on and so on. And so I think people who deny that reality are a bit foolish. So they don't really comprehend that there's a counter argument to be made. Hamel, in this article, doesn't make the counter argument, but I think we just have to be aware that there is a counter argument that says things are pretty good. It could be a whole lot worse. Um, you know, um, so the evolution of things has overall been favorable. Now, people say things, and not just Hamel, that we're running organizations based on 18th or 19th century thinking, 20th century thinking, and so on. And of course, with our last conversation, I described how it goes back much further than that. in time. And if you study the history of ancient Egypt, which of course they wrote things down so you could study what happened. Prior to that, there wasn't much writing of these kind of things. And then you see similar characteristics of what exists today and what existed then. And it's 166 generations to ancient Egypt. And so from a generational perspective, it's not that far back that we should think similarly. Of course, a lot is different, but the thinking is similar in terms of social castes and what you know the obsession with better when good enough will do and things like that. Um, so the years are many. 5,000 years, seems like a whole lot in terms of our lifetimes, but and it goes probably back further to soon after the Neolithic Revolution 10,000 years ago. But people are upset with bureaucracy, and they want to have some personal freedom to do better at work and be more creative, and be more efficient and so on. But most leaders are going to look at the various systems that exist, whether they understand them as systems or not, as being pretty good overall. Maybe not perfect, but gets the job done and good enough. People complain about bureaucracy and red tape, but what really that is of course batch and queue processing, where there's a long queue time between processing batches of information. So there's a lack of material and information flow, and that's what bureaucracy really is. And of course, people who are existing in the institution of leadership and system of profound privilege will tell you that bureaucracy is needed for various reasons, to check and balance various things, and to some extent they're correct, and to other extents that it's incorrect. But the view that people want something and need something better, of course, is real, but it's like a kind of like a governor on an engine. The change will only occur as fast as the people who are in control are willing to let that occur. And I recognize that people are, frustrated with that kind of thing. We talked last time, I think, a little bit about the, progressive management community, which involves lean and people who support things like Toyota's production system, et cetera. But, the past is ever present. Traditions prevail. Traditions are believed to be innately good, and people typically do not question traditions. I mean, what leaders, political or business leaders, stand up and say, do we really need this tradition anymore? Is it outdated? Is it still useful? What purpose does it serve? And so forth. People tend to not think like that. And so, in the Hamel article, it talks about building a managerial aristocracy. Well, business itself descends from aristocracy. The ruler, the king, queen, whatever, allowed people to go into business. So it's not unusual that a business would be structured in kind of an aristocratic fashion, with people at the top and workers at the bottom and some people in between to manage various affairs. And so it mirrors that, and going way back in time. So Hamel's criticism is, just the way things run does not give people the freedom to be creative and to create value better. Leaders are doing things that distract from value and so on. And yeah, that's true. But until you understand the causes of why leaders think the way they do and do the things they do deeply, not just the surface level stuff, which is what most people think about. Just surface level causality, leaders don't want to change. Well, why don't they want to change? You got to dig into this stuff much deeper. And that's hard for people to do because they don't have time or interest in digging into root cause, and that's what professors are for, to do things like that. Um,
Right.
do you have any comment in relation to what I said?
This is so wonderfully laid out, Bob. There are few things emerging for me, and I'll just place them and see how they speak to you. Um, I would imagine that any kind of arrangement amongst two people or more number of people or larger nation, and the way there is a coordination and competition and collaboration that happens, it would give rise to, it would be kind of a system, and the system would work for some and may not work for some. Uh, and then, obviously, if it doesn't work for some, uh, and again, these are not very distinct categories in the sense, even for people that it works for, there could be elements of some things within that that would not work for them. And vice versa, if there are things that are
Yeah,
not working for a certain group, there could be some things that are working for them. However,
right.
in the overall scenario, there could be this need and constant desire for a change of the status quo in some. So some people would want to preserve the status quo because it helps them in some way, and some
Hmm.
people would want change because they would believe that the next or the other would be better for them and their life. Without really going deeper into um, the nature of our desires, the nature of self, the nature of reality, uh, and the nature of existence, and what is inherently there that would keep coming back, perhaps, no matter how much you solve for it. And at some point, this constant, as you point out, that there could be this obsession to maximize. In fact, I'm reminded of a wonderful TED talk I had seen almost a decade back by Dr. Barry Schwartz from Swarthmore College. I think he's even written the book titled Paradox of Choice, where he says there are essentially two kinds of people, maximizers and satisficers. And
Hmm.
maximizers are never satisfied with
Yeah.
anything. And then there are satisficers who are, for them, good enough is good enough in life. Uh,
Yep.
so I think these are some things emerging. And uh, one more thing I would bucket, and then maybe you can speak to it. So I think you're not saying, I think what you're probably saying is, no matter what frameworks you use, no matter what you want to do with status quo and status change, uh, we need to go deeper into uh, things, deeper into the why of it and how of it, rather than making superficial references and selective argument to support one's own framework or theory. I'll halt
Yep.
here.
Yeah. So in the article about Hamel, they talked about this company in the Netherlands that has 10,000 nurses and what was it, two managers or something like that. And there's many companies you can point to that are the outliers that do things like that, but they tend to be the anomaly, tend to be anomalies, and business leaders typically ignore the anomalies. So anomalies are just that. They're few. There's I forgot the number. Yeah, there's something like 300 million businesses in the world, if I recall correctly.
Wow.
Um, some 300 million, something like that. But you can Google it and get a better estimate there. But there's a lot of businesses, and most conform to classical management and the status quo and so forth, and the hierarchy that Hamel complains about and so on. But there are these anomalies, but they don't tend to be influential. There's according to Jim Womack, the founder of the Lean Enterprise Institute, that there's no companies that have replicated Toyota's management system after 35, 37, 40 years. So Toyota's a kind of an anomaly that other people don't see, other leaders, business leaders, don't see worth replicating. But there are some who've come somewhat close. Um, but again, those are seen as a type of anomaly that is, why bother? And let's say, for example, that um, these were no longer anomalies, and the people who exist, who represent the institution of leadership and system of profound privilege, said, let's do what these anomalies are doing, and let's just wipe out the old systems, the old way of thinking that we have carried forward for thousands of years, and through the development of political economy and classical and neoclassical economics and so on. Let's just get rid of all that and anything related to it, and break the status quo. Well, there's going to be some people, large number of people, are going to be very unsatisfied with that. And what they're going to do is they're going to try to bring back the status quo. And you see that in a political world where certain people get elected to revive the old ways of thinking and doing things. I'm not making a value judgment if that's right or wrong. I'm just saying you see this phenomenon occur. There's advancements and then there's regression. And so if you are promoting progressive management and changing, breaking the status quo, you have to understand that there's people out there who will be highly upset, dissatisfied, think it's just a huge mistake to humanity, a huge mistake to a country's culture or what have you, the West, the Western way of thinking, and that they will get together and coordinate and drive it back to something representing the way it was. And so without understanding these things, a lot of these change things end up being kind of like, basically ineffective. I mean, they'll work in some companies for a period of time, but there's a change in ownership, a change in management, it regresses backwards and so on. So it
Right.
doesn't typically survive too long.
Right.
So, the community of people who advocate for change and improvement and so on, break the status quo, are largely ignorant of what's going on. And so what I've tried to do in my work is to give people this, his sort of inductive historical analysis so it's based on facts and real world. And yes, out of that develops theories of why things are the way they are, but it's fundamentally rooted in facts and observation of what's happening in the real world. And I don't specifically say as a result of my work, here's the theory that emerges from it, but somebody else can read it and then say, well, this is the theory that emerges from it. Because I'm tend to be more fact-based, observational, historical. I didn't set out to create a theory of why status quo prevails. I just
Right.
attempted to explain it, but not in a way that concludes the book and says, "Here's the theory."
Right. Right.
Um, so people often talk about unlearning things. We need to flush out our old way of thinking. That's hard to do. Folks complain about, there's a complaint on social media these days about why are people so addicted to tools for solving problems, so-called lean tools or whatever, management and whatever process improvement tools you can think of. Why are they so addicted to it? Well, tools are part of our evolutionary history as humans. We develop tools to survive, and this goes back millions of years, not just thousands of years, but millions of years. So we have a very difficult time thinking in terms of systems. That's probably very recent in our evolutionary history, such as Neolithic revolution, farming, agriculture, and animal husbandry, because you're
Right.
starting to create systems there. And then what follows after that, as you get cities and towns and political situations, and whenever that happened, prior to probably Egypt, probably in Mesopotamia, anyway. And so the tools are part of our evolutionary history. So we're naturally going to deconstruct systems into tools.
Right.
So you take the Toyota production system, you deconstruct it into a bunch of so-called lean tools.
Right.
So it's very hard to flush out the past from our evolutionary way of thinking about certain, how do you solve a problem? You need some kind of tool, a hammer, or a club, or as the monkeys do, or apes pull ants out of the hole on a stick, and then eat the ants from the stick.
Yes.
You need a tool to eat.
Right.
So
Yep.
it's not easy. People know it's not an easy thing to do, but I don't think they understand why it's not an easy thing to do.
Right. Um, so I'm just trying to build this or try to understand this a little more. So let's say you approach an organization, you go to an organization, and you start interacting with people there. And when you interact with people, you start getting different experiences and different stories. Again, mindful of whether they're giving socially desirable signals, how closer to truth we are in what they're narrating, um, how reflective they have been on their analysis or experiences, what they're narrating and sharing. And over a period of time, you gather aspects of some people talking about the opportunities that are possible. Uh, and then there are some people talking about problem statements or challenges or suffering that they're going through or unfairnesses that they see in the organization. Uh, and obviously, you come out and you map them or you just put them out on a sheet of paper, uh, at which point you're called into giving your understanding and your reflection on what you've just gathered. I'll halt here. Would you go along with me here and then take it forward, or would you revise what I just said?
No, I mean, I think you can definitely go down that path, and I think that's what some of Dave Snowden's work is trying to do through narratives. But you know, narratives are not observation. Narratives are a lived experience, and in a social setting, narratives are altered to avoid uncomfortable things, and people say what they expect others to hear, and they will avoid personal failings or poor judgments and things like that. Typically, will do so in a social setting. Um, so getting to the truth is very difficult because the truth is personal, it's subjective. And so when you come up with objective truth, that's it's not perfect because a lot of it is historical analysis and so forth, and there's biases built in and things like that. But when you try to get to the objective truth, people can really struggle with agreeing that something or other is actually the case. And so that's a huge challenge. People try to do that, but I think what I prefer to do is take an observational approach, a historical and observational approach to this. Observation of what's happening, in our lives now through various means, interacting with people, interacting with other sources of information, of credible information, and looking at the past and how those things line up or don't line up.
Right,
And I'm skeptical of narratives. Like if in a company setting you have people at different hierarchical levels, and even if it's the executive team, there's a hierarchy there. There's the CEO, the president, there's vice presidents, and some vice presidents have zero influence because they are responsible for fields such as purchasing, which historically has been not understood, not appreciated, and just not seen as influential, or maybe it's HR, pick one or the other. So there's sort of functional hierarchies as well as title hierarchies. And you get them together, how many of them are going to speak the truth? You know, uh, the objective truth in a narrative explanation of what's good or bad with the company. They'll tend
right,
to highlight what's good because being a team player is, what's good, minimize criticism, and so on.
right.
So I'm not saying you can't do it and get some useful information and make some progress. Of course you can, but I prefer observational.
Observation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So let's say there are two. One is the narrative uh, reports, and then there is the observation. And let's say you go down the path of the observation. I'm just trying to understand how would you uh, take it. What's the next thing that you would do? Let's say you observe and
Well, I mean, that would produce some evidence, and then and then here's the problem: the evidence doesn't line up with some people's truth, and so they ignore it. And I'm sure you've heard recently that no matter how much evidence you show somebody, the typical psychological reaction is to reinforce their own.
the backfire
Yeah,
effect.
yeah, correct. It backfires, And so that route tends to not be very successful.
Right.
There's this very slow evolution of where people come to see things. I'm trying to think of an example where that has occurred, and it's escaping me at the moment. But certain social situations are taboo for a long time, and then in the space of a few years, enough evidence has accumulated that okay, it's we've been taught or told it's taboo, but through our own experiences and through the weathering of time, we no longer see it as taboo. It's okay amongst a broader number of people, becomes socially acceptable. Um, uh, so but it's a slow evolution. I mean, it's incredibly slow, and to try to move people along faster than what they're prepared to do is very difficult. And that's why you have hierarchies, because the boss says, we're doing this, and people say, well, I think that's wrong, but that's the boss, and so we got to go do it. And that's why some people leave companies and other people are hailed as heroes for execution on doing what the boss said, even though it may be a gigantic mistake, but they pushed it through. Um, the other thing is, in the Hamel article, he says that the manager's job is to help people succeed. Well, business generally is what's called self-regarding. It's looking out after its own interest. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of people are employed by the company, and suppliers depend on the company, community depends on the company, investors depend on the company. But it tends to be self-regarding, not other-regarding. It's not really looking at, I mean, there's nothing in a business charter that says a company has to employ people. So it just fires people whenever, it's judges it's a good business decision to do so. So business is not designed fundamentally to be other regarding. Now, in terms of for-profit business, if it has other regarding effects for other people or categories such as suppliers and so forth, then, okay, but fundamentally it is not structured as an other regarding, institution or organization. It is self-regarding.
Yeah. I
And
have
the
one theory.
Western system of business is self-regarding. It's not like that around the world, but it is in Western business,
I
and
have
those who
one.
copy it.
Yeah, sorry. I have one curiosity around what you shared, Bob. Um, so when I work in, let's say even in this conversation, we are coordinating. There is some form of coordination, some form of exchange of ideas, exchange of insights, exchange of experiences, or exchange of observations, or exchange of narratives. Um,
Mhm.
and when we are coordinating, we are we are implicitly giving feedback to each other. There is feedback happening in terms of nods, micro expressions, the
Mhm.
allowance to speak, or interjecting maybe, and then
Yeah.
agreements and disagreements kind of thing. So we are anyways, in some sense, we are regarding the other as we are coordinating with the other. In that sense, we are regarding the other. Are you saying something else? Because I'm not. Uh, and obviously, we are there. We are here, even here, in form of there is some self-regarding happening. Um, I'm trying to get
Yeah.
to slightly more nuanced view
Yeah.
on this. Please, if you
Yeah.
could.
The term other regarding and self-regarding relate more to generosity and selfishness. You could look at it that
Okay.
way. You
Okay.
could look at it that way.
Okay.
Um, so business. So for example, you'll see pervasively, at least in Western business, the company is super profitable, but it's still laying people off. It's super profitable, but people aren't getting raises, cost of living adjustments, things like that. So the business is rewarding shareholders at the expense of workers. For example, um, it has not always been that way in history. There tended to be in Western business a different balance. A value judgment would be to say a better balance, but at least a different balance between, the rewards of the monetary fruits of the existence of a business. Now, when you work for a company, it's more than monetary fruits, but we also live in a system where if you don't have money, you're in tough shape. So um, money's important. Um, so anyway, I hope that kind of answers your
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
question about that perspective. One of Hamel's complaints is that the organization are still built for control, not trust, not creativity, and so forth. But there's a lot of people, and they can be at the bottom of the hierarchy, not just at the top, who strongly believe that there exists a natural social hierarchy, and that there is and should be people at the top who are in control of things, and then there is people at the bottom, and the people at the bottom could be the infirmed or the indolent or criminals or society's lesser producers or whatever one would like to call them, and they really believe that this is what God intended, for example, or they may have a secular belief that this is the way it should be.
right,
So that's a hard thing to overcome. Um, because it ties in with personal beliefs, maybe religion as well, or it crosses over between these things or whatever. So, um, you think about something that's popular these days. Psychological safety is an example of an other regarding, characteristic that is desirous of leaders to have, and humility. These are, other regarding characteristics. But the problem is, of course, that none of that is needed for success in business.
right,
You know,
right,
So a lot of leaders will say, why bother? This is not necessary for success in business. Coaching is popular. You need coaches, not managers. Coaching isn't necessary for success in business. Do what I say, it still works. Good enough.
right,
So I recognize, and I've been part of this tremendous frustration that we'd like to see these kinds of major changes and breaking of certain status quos in our lifetimes. But unfortunately, relative to the span of what's in our heads for thousands of years, using tools to solve problems and so forth, that's difficult to do within our lifetime. And some types of status quo changes, like something was taboo, now it's not.
yeah.
So we do see some changes there for sure.
Um,
But
an interesting
yes,
curiosity rises here, Bob. Sorry again, I'm interjecting on this.
no, I hope you will. Please do.
Yeah. So imagine there is a two by two. On the x-axis, we have the need for this, the breaking of the hierarchy, or the no need for this breaking of the hierarchy. So there is the need and no need, and the y is the
Yeah.
easy to do and the difficult to do. Am I hearing that while you might say that, first of all, we need to have slightly better perspective, better discovery or better analysis
Hmm.
of the need for it, whose need it is for making this
Yeah.
change. And I completely agree. I mean, when you have people, there are some things that you do better than I do, and I would want you to do them rather than me doing it. Like you and I won't sit in the cockpit of a plane just because we believe we can fly the plane. I think if
Right.
the we're not trained for it, so we want a pilot who can drive who can fly the plane. Uh, uh, so yes, people in different places in the hierarchy might also come to terms with what their capabilities are and what they want to achieve or do with this capability, or maybe want to
Mm-hmm.
enhance or not. And maybe they don't want the status quo to go. Maybe they want the hierarchies in the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they want certain different thing to happen within the organization, perhaps. So here is where maybe I'm hearing from you that we need to get a little more reflective on the need, whose need it is and what need it is. And then the other aspect is the easy and the difficult part of it,
Yeah.
where I hear you say that there are these historical forces or the momentum of millions of years that cannot just go away because of a model or a framework. Um, would that be? Would you want to build on this or take a riff on it?
Sure. Sure. Well, I'm just making a note here. Sorry.
Yeah.
People tend to do what's easy, not what's difficult. Learning to play a musical instrument is difficult. People would rather do what's easy and listen to music. Um, so that's why they use tools. Um, they develop tools to make something easier. And hierarchy is a tool. Hierarchy allows the person in charge to say, this is what we're going to do, or this is what you're going to do. And it avoids a lot of the, but this would be better, or, that's stupid, or whatever, that gets you in trouble for resisting those directives or commands. Uh, so, along with that hierarchy comes status, rights, and privilege, and so forth, which are kind of self-reinforcing. But that's, it's, I guess, human nature through our evolution to find tools to make things easier to do. And the fact of the matter is that the status quo in terms of the current management systems, which I broadly call classical management, are easy to do compared to Toyota's management system or its Western interpretation of lean. Those are hard to do. And that's why and even scientific management back more than 100 years ago, that's hard to do. And that's why generally in the category of progressive management, it's not popular amongst business leaders because these things are hard to do. And what's the matter with classical management? It's good enough. Is it perfect? No. Do some people get treated poorly? Yes. Do they get laid off for the purpose of increasing profits or whatever reason? Yes, they do. And I can't solve every problem in the world. That's the kind of thinking that will be applied. And what would you or I do if we were in those positions as well? And this applies even to small privately owned businesses. They have shareholders. The shareholders might be 1, 3, 5, or 100. But people make plans. Let's say I'm a shareholder in a business of 10 people. I'm just an investor. I got plans. I'm expecting a return. I'm going to take that money and do something with it. And it doesn't show up, and I'm annoyed. So I think the people at the bottom talk about how leaders have to have some empathy, but they're not too empathetic to what leaders have to deal with themselves. And it's not just shareholders, it's a balancing act and so forth. I'm not saying that we should accept that, but I'm saying it's a more complicated, complex situation than I think most people want to realize. And that's why leaders just kind of ignore all this noise of, they should be doing psychological safety, coaching, lean, whatever came before it, whatever will come after it, mostly ignore it because, what's the need?
Um, there's another invocation I would want to make here, Bob. In some sense, uh, we've had democracy for about 2 centuries, more than 2 centuries now. And the idea of democracy was every voice, there should be voice given, there should be voice in who is going to govern me and how, and accountability around it. When it came to businesses, you had the installation of hierarchies in some sense, where some people would know better what's good for the overall organization and community. And that's where maybe in the last couple of decades we saw some assertions against that, or maybe some corrections of balance against that, and which is where we see a lot of things momentum around emotional intelligence, momentum around psychological safety, trigger warning, safe spaces, decentralization. Uh, but we're seeing some interesting thing in the world of politics, in the world of the national discourse. We're seeing a comeback of the non-democratic assertion.
Mhm.
And in the business, we're seeing maybe it's a confused space right now in the business where you don't know whether you want to go with the assertive or the democratic in some sense. How would you weigh in on something like this?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely happening. That's something we observe and so forth. Hamel article talks about, or the writer says, we should bring in contradictory voices, and that's what democracy is: bring in contradictory voices. The of course difficulty with that is that it creates confusion, and it's its own kind of bureaucracy when you have all these contradictory voices saying, no, you should do this, no, you should do that, or you should do something in between, and or something further left or further right, and so on. And that's why businesses are not democracies. Businesses are, authoritarian in their fundamental nature. The leader says, do this, do that, and then relies on people to execute. And some people may be half-hearted, or what's the word? Not really. I forgot the word, but they're not really executing. They're dragging their feet and so on because they don't like it. But typically, people who bring in a company setting, people who bring in contradictory voices get into trouble because it's kind of an authoritarian environment, and democracy is just messy because contradictory voices are allowed to be expressed, and so politically, contradictory voices just cause problems in terms of leadership, and so that's why you see drifting back to, again, sort of a past a type of status quo, a different type of status quo, one that's less interested in contradictory voices.
Yeah.
And then, this will change, and these things run in cycles, right? Just like in a company, should we centralize or decentralize? no. Should we have, 20 vice presidents or 10, and then it grows back to 20, and, and so forth. And the same thing happens politically. If you have a democracy overcome authoritarianism overcome to democracy and go the other way, and so forth. And they run in cycles of 50 years to longer, probably
Yeah.
centuries in some cases, not probably, certainly centuries, and many centuries in some cases.
Yeah.
So
are you
yeah.
also, is it possible for you to weigh in on, are you also then saying there could be adaptive democracies and adaptive authoritarianism, and maladaptive democracies and maladaptive authoritarianism? Again, the word adaptive here is slightly, again, the metaphysical aspect of it needs to be adaptive for whom, for why, sort of thing. How would you
Right.
weigh in on something like this?
Interesting question. All of your propositions are interesting. Well, I mean, I think by design, authoritarian type of thing is slow to adapt, less adaptive, and we see that in companies with startups. Startups are quicker to respond to things, changes in the market or market needs, and so forth. And the older companies, Kodak is the famous example, or Xerox, and many other companies have had difficulty adapting because of the authoritarian nature of the company. Top down, the leader doesn't see it, even though the message is coming up from the bottom. The messengers get shot, and so on. And so, you can see the same thing politically in an authoritarian environment where the messengers get shot, sometimes not metaphorically, and slow to change to the environment. Now, one possible manifestation of this is the environment, global environment, the Earth warming up, and what are we doing to planet Earth with CO2 and plastics and various types of pollutions and things like that. And that, I suppose somebody could make the case that heading into authoritarianism is a good thing, because in 20 or 50 years, somebody's going to have to say, no more plastics, no more, CO2, no more this, no more that, because the planet has major problems. And maybe it'll be in 200 years. I don't know, life is interesting, right? I think what's part of this involves, people tell you we have to not live with the past, we have to break the status quo. But part of this is like traditions, our preconceptions. We don't ask, which of these preconceptions about authority and hierarchy are still useful and which aren't, and how do we evolve in step with, more in step less of a lag with changing times. Instead of a big lag, cut that lag in half. It's still going to lag because people are uncertain, can't predict the future. People are afraid of getting blamed, but certainly the lag can be, cut in half. In lean world or Twitter world, we say cut the waste by 90%. And maybe that's too much to cut the lag, but at least certainly a 50% cut of the lag can be done. That's what startups basically prove, that you can cut the lag. But they grow, they get hierarchical, they get bought out, and they get absorbed into the status quo.
Right. Right. Just switching a bit from the article, unless you have something else to add, I'll spend the next 5-10 minutes
Um,
on something else. Or you want to cover something,
well, just one other thing,
please.
to abandon the traditions and the preconceptions. There are social, economic, political, historical, philosophical, legal, spiritual. I mean, we're not just talking about abandoning just some few simple things. Within each one of those categories, there's many, many things to abandon. Not all of them, of course, but there's interconnections between these things. And so it's not such an easy thing to do. Anyway, yes, what did you want
That's
to move on
that's a
to?
beautiful wrap, at least on the article. I wanted to know what are you doing? So, a couple of curiosities. One, what are you doing nowadays? What are some of the open questions you're working on? And has there been something in terms of your belief that has got even more reinforced? And has something shifted in belief? Sorry, there are four of these. I'll keep coming. I've indexed them. I'll keep coming to them.
Yeah, okay. I'm going sort of backwards to looking at some of the important literature that I've read in the past to sort of re-mine it, like mining for other insights that I may have missed, because I thought it was such a fruitful area of study that there surely is more there. Um, I don't know how that will manifest itself. I've stopped writing books because I'm tired of writing books, and they're a little bit like having children because you have to maintain these books over time. They don't maintain themselves. There's various things you have to do, and it's just there's 28 of them now, and it's like it's enough maintenance activity for these things. Um, so I'm just researching it. I'm writing blog posts about these things that other things that I learn or other angles that I'm discovering or um, past angles that are not fully developed. And so I'm doing that in blog posts and social media. But other than that, there's the summer garden going. There's interactions with people, via Zoom and other ways, and just kind of take, in retirement, the good thing about it is you do what you want to do, not what people are requiring you to do. And so I've lived, as everybody else. I started working when I was 13. Had some little bit of broken period where I wasn't working because of university and stuff. But so it's been working for 40 years or something like that. And so
Wow.
it's just you get to the point where you kind of just do what you want to do, pick and choose the things that you think are most interesting. Really, what it was for me. What's interesting. I mean, certainly, I'm. This is kind of the way I work, which you might find unusual. Is somebody invited me to speak at a conference next March, but it was an interesting conference with an interesting audience, and I was thinking, okay, how can I, you know, they gave me the topic. How can I say this differently than what I said? So it just kind of consumed me that day, and so I prepared the presentation, that day for something in March.
Right.
And it's not done, I'm going to whittle away at it and improve and so forth. But it was just an interesting challenge, and I was curious because I didn't want to let the thoughts slip away if I started doing this presentation in like next February. So it's like just kind of get it done now, in quotes, because it's not done until you know uh, showtime. Uh, but I got inspired, I got curious, I got just wanted to get the thoughts out of my head.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
but that's the kind of stuff I'm doing, and
Yeah,
I'm doing a lot of reading, trying to understand what's going on in the world. I do appreciate you sending me the article about Hamel. I did also download the author's follow-on article um, with Hamel.
right, right. Uh,
Interesting stuff.
yeah. Um, Anything that has got even more reinforced in your belief over the last 1 year, and anything that you've shifted the belief on?
Hmm. Good question. Would have liked to have given some thought ahead of time. So what's reinforced? Well, I mean, the thing that I'm concerned about is whether my own biases are reinforced, what I've written about and so forth, what if my own biases are reinforcing what I've written about. And I think about that as potentially problematic. And that's one reason why I try to approach things at different angles. This problem of why leaders are not interested in lean management. I didn't just come out with one book to explain it. I looked at six different angles because it's an interesting problem and there's a lot, it's complex and so forth. Um, but I worry about, my own biases going forward, backwards too, but, just going forward as well. And what's changed my thinking? That was a question?
Yeah, anything you've shifted your belief on?
Boy, that's a hard one. Yeah, what preconception have I destroyed? What tradition have I destroyed? It's hard to do. I'm not. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer that at the moment.
No, no worries.
Um,
So yeah, this
I,
has been, yeah,
um, well, I mean, years ago when you'd get challenged. Well, this goes back though a long time. It's not recent. Um, is when you get challenged, like when I'd write a peer-reviewed paper and you submit it and the reviewers review it, and sometimes the reviewers are just like, "How did the hell did you get that out of the article? I didn't even say anything. That wasn't even the topic." Your immediate reaction is, God, these people are stupid. But you got to come back from that reaction and say, okay, let me try to understand what this person was saying. Let me read it and reread it. Let me let it sink in. Let me spend some days with this on and off to try and understand this and where they're coming from. And maybe I've misinterpreted what they said. And I know I've done that on social media, misinterpreting people what they say. It's very easy. Your amygdala gets hijacked, your emotional thing, and you think you're being attacked and so on. So, I had to step back from that mentality a long time ago, and I think I'm generally successful at it, but there's certainly specific examples which people can readily criticize me on.
great. Thank you so much, Bob, I think, for making this time and sharing spontaneously your insights and what you've been learning over the years. And we'll probably pick up something else and speak sometime in the near future. Thank you
Okay,
so
I hope
much.
so. It's always fun getting together with you. I appreciate it. It's really a good
Thank,
time.
thank you so much, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank,
Enjoy the
thank you.
summer. Bye bye.